I think the camera is great for what its intended purpose is, for its price point. The camera does what I want it to do. I'm comfortable using this camera in any situation, and I was never comfortable with the original Z6 or the Z7.
Yeah, it makes me wonder. It really makes me wonder. Ooh, I wonder.
Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Steve Mathis, and today I'm going to talk about the Nikon Z6ii. Let's call this a field review. Field test? Field review, whatever. I've had it out in the field a lot, and so now I'm going to talk about it and give you my thoughts on it. So this is the Nikon Z6ii. I put a little piece of yellow tape there with a 6 on it so I can tell it apart from my Z7ii, which I'm currently shooting video on. I have my iPad here with some notes because my memory ain't what it used to be, and I need help with that. My hair ain't what it used to be either, though. So anyway, I've had this camera since it was released a couple of months ago. I've been using it extensively. I've had it out. I've done a lot of birds in flight with it. Photographed my kids with it a lot. I photographed some surfers, some abstract waves. I've used it in low light. I photographed my dogs. There's Lula. Hi, Lula. Photographed my dogs, other people's dogs. What else? Low light. I've used the FTZ adapter quite a bit, like on this 600 f4. I've used native mount lenses like this 51.8. So anyway, I feel like I have a pretty good handle on the camera. And but that said, I use the camera differently than you do, I'm sure. So with all reviews, I think there's a good time to mention a disclaimer that what I like about a camera and what I need a camera to do is probably totally different than what you like and what you need. So don't take my word for any of this stuff, and certainly correct me if I get any of my facts wrong, because I'm kind of winging this, even though I have some notes. It's not scripted, and I might get some facts wrong here and there. And certainly if you notice that I could be doing things better with the camera or have some ideas, let me know in the comments below. And this is just my thoughts, my opinions, as a guy who uses a camera every day. So if you are thinking about buying the camera and looking for some thoughts, review type stuff, look at some other people's stuff too. Don't just take my word for it. We're all going to have different ideas, different things we like, different things we don't like. This is one opinion to throw into the vast mix of opinions that are on YouTube. So let's talk real quick about expectations. This is a $2,000 camera. So I'm not expecting it to be a Sony A9 II. I'm not expecting it to perform like one. I've used the Z6, the original Z6, and the original Z7 quite extensively, so I know kind of what to expect from a second generation version of that. But let's not try and compare, like, this camera sucks because it's not a Sony A9 II. It's $2,500 extra to buy a Sony A9 II, so you should get something for that extra $2,500. The big question for me is, can this camera do what I want this camera to do? And, you know, the reality is, the short answer is yes, I think it can. This is not the best camera on the market, and you shouldn't expect it to be. At this price point, it's not intended to be a pro-level sports action hardcore camera. So keep your expectations in check for what this camera does. And I don't think you'll be disappointed in it. That said, let's jump into a summary. I'm going to run through a quick summary of this, the camera, and then I'll get into some details a little after that. So the quick summary is, as I just said, I think the camera is great for what its intended purpose is, for its price point. The camera does what I want it to do. I'm comfortable using this camera in any situation, And I was never comfortable with the original Z6 or the Z7 in every situation. There were lots of times where I would reach for my D850 because it was a much better tool. So in that respect, it's a massive improvement that I would be happy to just use this camera as my only camera. I won't do that, but I can do anything I want with this camera. And that includes birds in flight, and that includes action. That doesn't mean it's the best tool for those jobs, but it's good enough for my purposes in every situation that I've encountered so far. So I think that's pretty good praise. I love having a new vertical grip here. This battery grip that now has controls and buttons so I can shoot in the vertical orientation, which I love to do all the time. Having space for 2 batteries is excellent there as well. The buffer is much improved, and that's a big deal because I'm shooting bursts a lot, and being able to, just crank away, keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. Oh yeah, I'm still shooting. That's great. Oh man, what a sequence, right? It's like kind of overkill. So it's not a D6 where it's unlimited. Eventually I'd hit the buffer there, but it's certainly big enough for my needs, and the old cameras, the original Z cameras weren't. So that I love having that. Image quality is excellent. It was on the original. It's great, high ISO performance. Image quality is excellent. It's a great value at $2,000. It feels great in my hand. Your hand might be different. I'm used to Nikon cameras, and I'm used to Nikon Ergonomics. And I appreciate that Nikon hasn't strayed too far. All the buttons are kind of where I want them to be. It just feels good in my hand, and it's a pleasure to use. It doesn't get in my way. The menu systems, everything, are very familiar, and I can just pick it up and start shooting, and it feels great. I think it's a substantially better camera than the Z6. Looking at the specs and the improvements, I don't think necessarily point to the cumulative effect. It's a bunch of smaller improvements. The bottom line for me is that a bunch of small improvements are adding up to a much improved camera that I really enjoy using, and I'm able to make some great images with, and it does its job for me. So that's great. Okay, so there's the summary. If you want to tap out now and skip all the details and discussion, go for it. Thanks for watching. But let's dig into what's new and the important things of what's new. There's a bunch of little stuff that's new, but the things that are important to me that are new are a big deal. The vertical grip, big deal for me. So I'm psyched to have that. Dual card slots are not a big deal to me, but to some people they are, and that's cool. So there's a CF Express XQD slot, and then an SD card slot there now for those of you who are into that. I just use my SD card slot as an overflow for if I really get into a good situation and I'm cranking away, so I don't have to swap cards mid-shoot. It'll just go over and overflow into that second card slot. So not a big deal to me. Might be a big deal to you. Bigger buffer, as I mentioned, is a big deal. So dual processors is the last one that I'll mention. You can't see it, obviously, but you feel it. So having twice the processing power just makes everything a little bit quicker, and everything happens just a little bit more crisply, if that makes sense. So that's a big deal, and I think it makes a substantial difference. So those new things are things that I like about the camera. There's a few other things that I like about the camera. The cost, $2,000, I think it's a great value. Image quality, buffer, vertical grip, everything just feels quicker and happens a little bit more crisply. Ergonomics I love about Nikon. I've already mentioned that. The Nikon ergonomics, the menus, the buttons, they all work great. The buttons are big enough for a mirrorless camera. A lot of the mirrorless systems have tiny little buttons that don't work well when you're wearing gloves, winter gloves, which I use a lot. So I appreciate that Nikon has kept reasonably big buttons that I can still operate with a gloved hand. So that's important for me. I've had the camera out in extreme weather. Extreme. Ooh. But yeah, I've had it out in the heat and humidity of Hawaii. It worked flawlessly. In massive downpours in Hawaii, it worked flawlessly. I've had it out in the snow. I've had it out in 15 below zero. It's worked great. So weather sealing, cold weather performance, no problem at all. Oh, and it doesn't overheat either. I'll mention that. Anyway, USB charging is kind of a cool little thing that I wouldn't necessarily have thought that I would use all the time, but I do. So I can just plug a USB-C in right here. As I'm driving down the road, I just plug it in whenever I'm moving between locations, and it charges both batteries in here for me. So that's a little thing. That's one of those little things that makes it like, a good improvement. That I can keep my batteries topped off just as I'm driving down the road in between locations. There's a few things that I don't like. The biggest one that everybody complains about online, and I think it's reasonably justified, or it certainly has been with the original cameras, autofocus performance. So let's just say autofocus is not state-of-the-art on this camera. A $2,000 camera typically isn't going to be state-of-the-art anyways, so that's an expectation thing. I would love to see state-of-the-art autofocus from Nikon. Sony and Canon, in my experience, both are ahead of Nikon in terms of autofocus performance. That said, in almost all the time, this camera is good enough. There's occasionally, and we're going to talk about that, there's some little glitches. But other than that, in normal operation, it's been working great. I would say it's not state-of-the-art, but it's as good or better than my Nikon D850s that I've been using with excellent success since they came out. So that's kind of been my benchmark, is once it's as good as a D850, I'll get rid of my D850s. And I did sell one of my D850s. I've still got one of them. So that should tell you something. While the animal eye autofocus is great, like for shooting dogs and cats and stuff, it doesn't seem to work very well at all for wildlife, and it doesn't work well for animals that are moving more than just a kind of a slow walk. So that's a bit of a problem. I think they need to get that figured out, get that animal eye autofocus working a little bit better. This has a Tilty Screen, which is fine. I prefer a full flip out, one that I can like tilt this way too. I can vlog with, I can flip it out and vlog with it. Not everybody has that need, but for me, I would prefer a fully articulating screen. So that would be nice to have. Battery door. This isn't one of those things that's just a weird, like my battery door on my old Z cameras, I never had a problem with it, but for whatever reason, I'm having a big problem with it. And it might be because this battery grip is there, that I'm able to get more of my hand on the camera. But as I'm like picking the camera up or setting it down, I find myself accidentally like rubbing across that door, and it pops open all the time. Like, if the camera's sitting there and I go to pick it up, and sometimes it'll just pop open. I don't know what I can do about that. Obviously, I could use some gaffer tape there, but I think that makes it then a pain to actually get the card out. But I probably will end up just gaffer tapering that, which is kind of weird. In the original Zs, this little viewfinder cup kept popping off all the time, and I had to gaffer tape that down. I haven't had that happen once so far with using this camera, so that's a good improvement. I don't know what they did differently there, but that seems to be on there better. But now this battery door is like a problem. It shouldn't just pop open like that, right? It's just like, whatever. All right, what have we not talked about yet? Video performance. I'm not super critical about video performance. I basically use video to make YouTube videos. And for my purposes, these have excellent video. The original Zs had excellent video that were good enough for what I needed here. The autofocus definitely seems better in this camera, which is great. It's welcome, but I'm not like a super video aficionado. So I think it works great. I love that I can shift between video and stills just that quick, that seamless. It works great. I can be taking photos, click, shoot a little video, click back to photos, and it works really seamlessly. So for my purposes, these cameras work way better than like a D850 in the same situation. Excellent for video. This camera they're going to have 4K 60 available in a firmware update in February, I think. Don't quote me on that. Some people are psyched about that. I don't know. I probably won't use it very much. Those file sizes are just going to be absolutely gigantic, so I probably won't use it very often. But video quality is excellent, certainly good enough for my needs. If you're like a total videographer, you should probably watch somebody else's video-centric review. But it works great for a hybrid shooter like me. I prioritize stills, but I use video, and I want the video as good as I can reasonably get. So it's been good. I have a bit of a wish list, a few things that, if Nikon's watching, they're not watching. But if by chance some of this stuff would filter down, it would be great for Nikon to make a couple of improvements off of my wish list. First one is more button customization options. The biggest one that I miss is I use back button autofocus with the AF on button, and then on my DSLRs, whether it was the D500 or the D5, the D6, the D850, they all allow you to program this joystick button to be a second AF on button with a separate autofocus area mode. And I use that all the time, and it's extremely helpful for my style of shooting. But they don't allow me to do it on the Zs, only on the DSLRs. So it seems crazy, but I would love to have that. I'd love to see a faster frame rate available in all autofocus area modes. So currently you only get 14 frames per second if you are shooting with single point autofocus and 12-bit RAW files. I'd love to have that, but I don't shoot 12-bit. I shoot the 14-bit RAW because I want maximum image quality, and I'm not always in single point autofocus. So I'd love to be able to use that in all autofocus modes. Currently, the way I shoot, which is 14-bit, and then often I'm in dynamic or autofocus or auto area mode, whatever, I'm only getting 9 frames per second, which again, that's what I'm used to shooting with my D850s. So I'm certainly not taking a step down, but I would love to be able to utilize what is advertised, and that's the 14 frames per second. So I'd love to see that as a wish list item. Battery door redesign, obviously, wish list. That's not going to happen in any firmware update, but hopefully they might learn a lesson on their next generation of this. And then last, it's the kind of the biggest thing that people pick on these cameras is autofocus performance. So I'd love to just see more consistency, because this thing is doing great the majority of the time, but it does glitch out once in a while. That's a problem. And I'd love to see a separate mode for their tracking mode. Right now you have to be in auto area mode, and then you have to program a button or press another button to enter the tracking mode, and then push that button again to get out of tracking mode. It's too cumbersome. I don't understand why they don't just have a separate mode for it. Eye detect for wildlife, I'd love to see that work like on birds and mammals and whatever. Some of the other companies are able to do that. So hopefully with some of the Nikon Pro level stuff, those kind of things will happen. All right, let's talk about some images and some image sequences. Let's start with animal eye autofocus. So here I've got a sequence of some images of my dog, Lula, who's taking a nap right behind me there. She's a world champion napper. The eye autofocus works really well on static dogs. So I've got a couple of images here that were taken around the house, and with this 50 millimeter 1.8, and it finds the eyes and it works excellent. So no problem there. It works absolutely as intended, and it works wonderfully. But then we get into some outdoor stuff, and where I've got animal eye tracking on, and she's moving, like jogging, kind of walking slowly to me, and it just fails. So we've got, a sequence of a few images here, and this is pretty typical where it would pick up a handful of the images would be okay. I'd say less than half of them are going to be in focus, and then the other half, it's going to miss focus. So you can see as I'm looking through these images here, the focus just misses, completely. It'll focus on like her back or her tail, and then it magically finds her eyes. And so it's inconsistent. Like, yeah, I can get a nice sharp photo out of there, but they should really, she's walking, basically. They should all be in, really nice sharp focus. So they've got some work to do on getting that ready for action. Birds in flight. I did a lot of birds in flight, let's call it testing, but I shot a lot of birds in flight with this camera, especially when I was in Hawaii. That was all I could find to shoot. And I went to a cool little wildlife refuge, and I had some albatross to photograph and some tropic birds. And anyway, I had a lot of opportunity to try different autofocus area modes and practice my panning and framing and all that stuff. And so I got a really good selection of images here to look through, some of which are great. Let's start with, this is a tropic bird. I just had this on auto area. So just the whole frame is available for the camera to find the subject. This is a pretty light colored bird with a pretty monochromatic background, just kind of some high clouds. So pretty flat. And, we start out with the bird pretty small in the frame. It finds the bird, no problem, and it just tracks it on in. And you can see every one of these frames is tack sharp. Bang, 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 just sharp, sharp, sharp. And that is what I found to be most of the time. With a couple of exceptions that we're going to show you here, it worked really well. So even in pretty tough situations, it's not tough in the sense that there's one subject that's close to you and everything else is behind it. But it's pretty low contrast, pretty monochromatic, and the bird was reasonably small in the frame, but it was still able to pick out that bird consistently over and over and over. And track that bird moving fast, flying really fast and making erratic maneuvers. It did a really excellent job. I think better than my D850 would have done. And so I was very happy with the majority of these. And I could do this consistently all day long. But then once in a while, I'd get thrown a curveball where, for instance, this is a tropic bird as well. And this one's even bigger in the frame, but it gets lost. Like it's very weird because the first frame in the sequence, you can see it flying kind of to the left there. That first frame is beautifully sharp, and then it loses focus. And then, the bird's still, it's big enough in the frame and there are focus points out there. It shouldn't lose focus like that, but it just once in a while, it just does. It loses focus like that. So that happens. That's certainly the exception and not the rule. Here's a sequence of an albatross that's coming in. This is another one where the camera inexplicably kind of lost it, where the albatross is big enough in the frame, there's nothing in the background, there's nothing else that could potentially be a subject there, but as you can see, the albatross, as it comes across the frame, it's sharp, and then it's a little out of focus, and then it's a little out of focus, and then it's sharp again. It's just missing a little bit there, but it's enough that those images, I have to throw them away. They're no good to me. So that happens occasionally. But then, this sequence, for instance, of the albatross, this was a long sequence. And, it starts out with the albatross, pretty white, head and bird with a dark background. And it's tracking that. Every one of them sharp and beautiful. Then the bird moves out into a different background that's less contrast, but still every one of these is just beautifully tack sharp. And this albatross, it's a big bird, but man, they fly fast. And then it starts, cruising sideways. Every one of these is lovely. And so this is just auto area mode. The camera found it, tracked it beautifully, 100% hit rate. And that's what happened more often than not. But then we get these weird situations where it just loses it. I tried, to track birds with a cluttery background. So like here's an albatross with a, cluttery background, being some rocks and ocean waves and stuff that are kind of, similar. Black rock, black wings, white foamy water, white body of the albatross. And the camera has no problem. Bang, bang, bang. It nails the focus on all of those and doesn't switch over to the background. Similar situation with tropic birds. They're flying in with a cluttery background, a mixture of dark rock and white foamy water, and it's able to track it beautifully as that thing is flying erratically. I'm doing my best to keep it in the frame, and the camera just keeps nailing it. So it's certainly a capable camera. It's got a couple of glitches there that I can't quite pin down or nail. It's kind of frustrating. But, even these tiny, like this Tropic Bird that's basically the same color as the background, just white with a white background, and very small in the frame. I mean, that thing's taken up just a tiny little fraction of the frame there, and it's able to find that and track it, and 100% hit rate on those. So I don't know. It's there. It's really close, but there's just a little bit of inconsistency with these couple of scenarios where it just misses. The biggest frustration, and I don't have good examples of it, but it's happened enough that it's a problem, and that the focus has missed, like it tracking the bird, and then it lost the bird and got stuck there. And no matter what I did to try and get it back on the bird, reactivating, very obvious what the subject is, it just stopped focus, wouldn't do it anymore until I either adjusted the focus manually and then got it back on it, or turned the camera off and back on. That would reset it. But, how many images have I shot with these two cameras? Maybe 15,000 images. It's probably happened 5 times. And some of those are like super obvious, where there's a bird sitting on a branch. There's nothing else in the frame. The focus goes out to infinity, and it's stuck there, and the bird is filling the frame, and no matter what I do, it's stuck out at infinity, and it won't come back and focus on the bird. So there's certainly a bug, a glitch there that I would love Nikon to fix, because that's super frustrating. It doesn't happen very often, 1 out of every few thousand frames, but it shouldn't happen at all. So I hope Nikon gets that figured out. Some image sequences here. There's just, it works really well. The other birds in flight here, these trumpeter swans, it nailed these trumpeter swans in flight at close range, handheld with this 600 f4. That's a difficult thing to do. It's much, much better than the old Z cameras. I can do what I want now with the autofocus system, and I couldn't before. So there's no doubt, that Sony A9 II would have nailed every single one of these, right? But this isn't an A9 II. This isn't a pro-level sports action wildlife camera. So I don't know that it's appropriate to expect that. So for what this camera is, I'm very happy with the autofocus. It'll do what I need it to do. And I believe I'm a pretty demanding photographer when it comes to everything, but certainly autofocus performance. So anyway, there's a few other images here that I'll show you that just the camera nails it, and it has no problem with these. The birds in flight was the vast majority of them. It nailed them, and then there are a few glitches that are kind of frustrating and unexplainable. But that's the deal. So anyway, there's some image sequences to look through, and the proof is in the images. There's a lot of, not necessarily the greatest images ever seen. I was trying to make nice images when that opportunity presented itself, but I really wanted to test the autofocus system here with these images and some of these sequences, and I believe it's a vast improvement for sure. If it's good enough for you, that's up for you to decide. It's certainly good enough for me now, and the Z cameras were not before. So anyway, that's it for the image sequence. Let's go now to wrap things up. So anyway, there we have it. We talked about what I like, what I don't like, wish list. We looked at some images. Time to go. I'll end the video here. Let me know if you have any questions down below. I'll try and answer questions in the comments below if I don't get too overwhelmed with that. And I'm going to have a link, an Amazon affiliate link in the description here if you want to buy one of these cameras or anything from Amazon. Go ahead and click on that link, and then I'd appreciate that. Amazon sends me a couple of bucks for whatever you buy, and so that is very helpful. And other than that, thanks for watching, and please subscribe to the channel for more Nikon Z stuff coming in the future as I get to review the Z7 II, and I'll talk about menu setups, different tips and tricks as I'm learning the cameras. And, of course, my regular vlogs where I get out in the field and make photos. If you enjoy those, subscribe for more. So have a great day, and I'll see you on the next video. And I'm going to get back out there and shoot some more with the Nikon Z6 II and the Nikon Z7 II, which I'm filming this with. Take care. See you later.